Back in November, I wrote a novel in 1 month for the Easy Writing Challenge, and I've collated some of my advice as to how I managed to do that into this video. The first thing that I did to help me write a book in a month is that I had a really hard deadline, because it was for a writing challenge, so I set a start date, which was the 1st of November, and an end date. And I started later than November 1st. I actually started like at 2 a.m. or something like that. And then I finished it November 23rd or something like that. Point is, I had like a rough timeline or a framework of exactly when it needed to be done. The second thing that I think helped is that prior to writing the novel, I actually sat down and I wrote out a start to finish treatment of the novel. It was about, I want to say 3,000 words, maybe, could be more, of the chapter by chapter breakdown of what needed to happen per chapter, which is kind of how I used to do my webtoon, where I would write down a rough summary of the characters involved, what they need to know, and I would go from there. So that helped a lot because I wasn't really stuck in the weeds of knowing what needs to come up. The third thing is that it was a contemporary romance, which is a little bit formulaic in the sense of there's expected beats and there's stuff that you kind of need to have done for the story to come across. So that makes it a lot easier to write, especially compared to other things that I tend to write, which have a lot of world building or logic stuff to it, or magic systems or history. There's none of that needed. It's a lot smaller in the scope. The fourth thing is that I had previously written a draft of this story, although much of the plot has changed and the pacing of subplots, I removed subplots. I used that initial messy first draft in 2023 to write that in-depth, step-by-step chapter outline. So theoretically, the final book that I put out was written in a month, start to finish, but there was a lot of pre-work done in terms of thinking about it, failing at it, writing it in the wrong tense, writing it from different viewpoints. I spent a lot of time thinking about it before I actually put it to paper. Fifth thing is that the cast was very limited because it really was just the main character and then the love interest. And there is a couple of characters peripherally to that, but it wasn't very ambitious in terms of the size of the cast. So there wasn't a lot of side plots, there wasn't a lot of subplots, there wasn't a lot of, running around and trying to make sure everyone's accounted for and where their whereabouts are. It's a very tight scope in a very tight timeline, and I think that just made it incredibly easy to write. Due to the nature of my job as well, I was able to carve out chunks of time when I was in the mood to, because my job is very mood-based and I make my own hours. So that's definitely a luxury of the career path that I'm in, being a full-time content creator and streamer. So I understand if you have kids or a job that has an accountability of it, that would make it more difficult to do that. I personally struggle with the writing a little bit every day mentality. I tend to just turn up, and as you can probably see from the screenshots, I'll just binge write like 2 or 3 chapters in a row, and then I'll take a day or 2 off, and then I'll come back to it. One thing that I struggle with is any methodology of writing, any system by which someone teaches you to write is never going to apply directly to the situation that you're in or what works best for you. And I think it's really nice if you can find advice out there that really works for you. But I also realize the utility of me saying this in a video designed to help you understand your own process. But I guess it's just nice to know that everybody's a little bit different and you should only really take what applies to you or experiment with things and see if you like it. But don't feel like every single piece of writing advice has to apply to you, because it's all subjective. Every author has their own personal pace at which they work, and there's also different systems by which they work best. There's periods of time even when I'm able to turn up every day and write a little bit every day, but then sometimes I'm just not able to sit down and dedicate that kind of spaced out attention, and I really do just have to binge write a bunch of stuff and then let it sit, because it just helps me to go from scene to scene. It helps me to go chapter to chapter. Much like drawing, the only way to get better at writing is to write. The only way to get better at anything is to just do the thing. And there's no lesson, there's no course, there's nothing that you can take that's gonna make that not true. It's a very tedious piece of information. It's a very tedious piece of advice, because it's difficult to make it more specific than that. It really is just a matter of sitting down and writing. And one thing that I personally do, if I cannot write, like quotation marks, if I cannot write, I always have a brain dump document within the document where I just will sit down and just type random stuff. So I'm writing in the document. I'm doing the physical act of writing, even if it's not any usable words that I'll be putting forward in future. But it's kind of connecting those neurons to be like, to make it okay for me to sit there and do the physical thing. Because sometimes I get a disconnect with my body and my mind. And like, I'll be out of body looking at my hands and find it difficult to type. So I think taking off the pressure and just letting yourself write whatever it is in whatever format in the document has its own value too. I think it's also good to just remember that you have to approach it from where you're at. So if you're a hobbyist and you don't work full-time as an author, or you've never, you have no stakes in it except for the fact that you want to have done it, then just be kind to yourself, because there's no point holding yourself to the standards of professionals if it's just not something that you want to do professionally. It's really hard because there's a mixture of mental health stuff where people will be like, just take it easy and take a break and don't force yourself. Like, that is true. But then there's the flip side where it's like, you still just need to do the thing. And if you can't do the thing and you can't force yourself to do the thing and you don't want to do the thing, I guess I'll tell a little anecdote. In the past, before I was a full-time streamer, I had someone in my life that was a full-time streamer. And so I asked them, hey, do you think I have what it takes to become a full-time streamer? And they told me no. And a while later, when I did become a full-time streamer, I asked them why they told me they thought I couldn't do it. Like, I was like, why did you tell me that I couldn't do it? I feel like you should have supported me. And they said that if I was stopped from being a full-time streamer because they told me that I couldn't do it, I lacked the perseverance it would take to become a full-time streamer. If getting one no from one random person is enough to stop you from doing something, or one rejection from someone, you need to have the drive and the stubbornness to just keep doing it, regardless of whether or not somebody tells you that you can do it. You need to do it without permission. You need to do it as much as you can. You need to do it because you want to do it, because that's the mechanism by which you're going to complete anything. Writing is difficult because it's a very solitary undertaking. It's something that you have to do it because you want to do it. And you have to be able to do it without people cheering you on. You have to do it without accolades. You have to do it without even knowing if it's going to be good at the end. Because it's something that you can learn from by simply doing it, and the only way to do it is to do it. And there's a lot of waffle, there's a lot of different writing courses, there's a lot of different people being like, oh, if you just do the XYZ, if you just get a planner and you write out this, or you track this, there's a lot of fluff you can add on top of the mechanisms of simply writing. But I didn't do any of that, really. I just set a deadline, set an expectation for myself. I sat down, I wrote a chapter-by-chapter outline of what I wanted my story to be, and then I just wrote it. And unfortunately, it's as simple as that, and unfortunately, it's as difficult as that. It is possible. It is possible to write a book in a month. Will it be the best thing ever? I don't know. Probably not. Will it be publishable? Probably not. You probably need to edit it still. Probably need to review it. There's a chance that you write a whole book, and at the end, it isn't usable. I've had that happen plenty of times. But then I look at it after the fact, and maybe there's a plot thread, or there's a general structure, or there's a character, there's something in it that I can take out and I can move it to another project. There's another, or I can look at the whole thing all together, and that allows me to have that moment of hindsight, and then I can write an outline that could potentially be usable. Or, preferably, you sit and you edit it and you work on it from there. So how did I write a book in a month? Unfortunately, I just did it. Can you do it? Probably. If you just sit down and do it, man, it really is difficult. The writing advice really just is, just do it. It's truly just the Nike sign, huh?